They are starved for the truth.
Do you think there could be others?
Why would he make such a vast universe? Yet save it only for us?
There's a clip from Disclosure Day. It's a movie, I don't know about Kenny, but for me, I've been waiting a long time to see Steven Spielberg's latest. I'm Mike Hatch.
I'm Kenny Dickson.
And here we go. Another episode of Faithspotting, probably within a week or two of the last one. Man, this is weird, Kenny. Maybe it's just the summer stuff going on.
Yeah, I guess so.
There's a lot of good movies going out, and I've got a lot of time on my hands that I've been using wisely and spending some of it going to the film, going to the movies.
Yeah. Having time helps.
Oh, absolutely. Now, one thing I got to throw out there, Kenny and I doing Faithspotting, having a podcast, membership does have its privileges because we're able to get a lot of awesome screeners and see a lot of movie openings and meet a lot of folks, interview a lot of folks. I need to give total credit to The Observer. It's a local paper here in the DFW area. I get a weekly or even a couple of days a week, I get emails from them. And it was one of the, hey, click here if you want to win tickets to a free preview screening of Disclosure Day. And I said, let me try this. Let me see what's going on. And I ended up winning. So took Kenny with me and we saw this past Tuesday night where it's going to be coming out in theaters on this coming Friday the 12th. So we saw it a couple of days early and I've already seen I've already seen what is the word I'm looking for? Not preview. No, like when you're critiquing it.
Movie reviews.
Okay, I'll say that. So I've already seen movie reviews about this, Kenny. So I think it's fair that we can get this thing out maybe even before this debuts in theaters. So I'm feeling
they've released the block date.
Yes. So we can talk freely about it. Yes, we can talk freely about it. So so Kenny, go ahead and get into, and I think we agreed that we're not going to go too much in spoiler territory. We'll talk about the film, but we really will try not to do any spoilers. But give us an overview of what's going on with this thing.
Well, it's a passion project from Steven Spielberg. He calls it his bookend, his sci-fi bookend to Close Encounters, and it essentially is his wondering about what would happen if we were to disclose to the world the reality of aliens, present aliens, or aliens with us, and what would be the impact if all of a sudden that news got dropped, so to speak, that there is proof of alien life. And so it's the story of someone who has proof of that and their efforts to try to force the disclosure of that information to the world against the efforts of the government gatekeepers.
Okay, that was actually really good. I thought that somewhere along the line with that description, you were going to drop some spoilers, but that was really good, Kenny. Well done. That was very good. So Kenny and I saw this great list of actors I've seen in several critiques of the movie. Emily Blunt, some of the best work that she's done. And I have to agree that it took a while for me to realize, oh, wait, she's British. And not even a touch of the accent, but she's got a lot of good acting in this. Josh O'Connor, and I'll be the first to say that Kenny was the one that reminded me that in a past Faithspotting, we chatted about his film, Rebuilding. That was a great film. So he was excellent in this as well. He was definitely the male lead in this movie. Colin Firth, considered the bad guy, if you will, although there are other people that take that. Coleman Domingo, gosh, man, I think he's this year's Pedro Pascal because, my gosh, he has been in almost every other film that I've seen this year.
He's had a good 2 or 3 year run.
As he should with his Academy Award nomination. And it's very natural after you get nominated for an Academy Award, the other parts start coming in, and he deserves every single one of them. He is an incredible actor, and he was great in this film. Bunch of other ancillary parts as well, people that you'll recognize, but the bulk of it were definitely Emily Blunt, Josh O'Connor, Colin Firth, and definitely Coleman Domingo as well. So now that we're within the area that we can certainly talk about this film, what did you think about it, Kenny? You hinted at it when we saw it the other night, but what were your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it as an experience, as a cinematic experience. It was very good. It's one of those summer blockbuster types, full screen required, big story, big music, big cast, big director, obviously, and it's a very enjoyable watch. And for what's on the screen, I really enjoyed it. After some reflection, I would have made some changes, but I would say definitely go see it and go see it in the theater.
I have to agree with you. I loved it. There were lots of parts to this that just touched me as a person. However much I try to go into a film, especially when I know we're going to talk about it on the podcast, and keep it like Switzerland, 50-50 about things, and really look at a film just on its own merits, I can't help but bring my own stuff in. Uh, I was talking about this the other night with, I think it was a friend of mine. And one of the things that struck me about this, without talking too much about the film, is the use of cardinals. And one of the things that has been happening here at the Hatch household is that we have cardinals that'll come and take our bird feed right outside of our little breakfast nook area. And so cardinals are very special to me, my wife as well. We call them mom and dad. We've lost both of our parents. So the male red cardinal being dad, and the brownish orange beaked female being mom. So in the film, that really touched me, the way that the cardinals and animals were used. Another neat kicker to that is that right outside of our house, to the right, when you walk in the bushes, we have a mama cardinal that just hatched 4 little cardinals. So seeing this film, I couldn't help but get engulfed in that part of it. And that really touched me. And if I didn't have that, maybe I wouldn't have the same reaction, but I've always thought that way about cardinals. Almost, I hate to say, like the window to those who have gone before us, but that really touched me.
They're symbolic of that for a lot of folks.
Absolutely.
And it happened with our family when Michelle's dad died. The next day, there was a big cardinal at our kitchen door, sliding glass door, and it just hung around for a while. And so, absolutely, and that was neat that they included a cardinal as a part of that. It had a place in the film.
And there was just, when we're talking about it being a Spielberg film, it had his fingerprints all over it, as he should. It's his film. But everything from the high energy chase that we saw in E.T., that we saw a little bit in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I couldn't help but, like you said earlier in the podcast, to think that it really was a bookend that started with Close Encounters of the First Kind, went to E.T., and now is wrapped up with Disclosure Day. I think it really wraps that trilogy up in a nice, pretty bow, especially with the way that the film ends. I love the way that the film ends. When I was a kid, one of the things that I always used to love to do at Hollis Elementary School in Hollis, New Hampshire, there was 3 or 4 supernatural books that I just loved to check out. And it was an elementary school book, and they were illustrated and very nicely illustrated. One was about ghosts. The other one was about UFOs. The other one was about strange creatures like Bigfoot and Loch Ness. I've always been into that supernatural stuff. It's fascinated me. Believing it or not, it's just always very fascinating. So through this film and the way that it wrapped up, I was all in. I just always been into that. And it was very much that, and the way that they handle it. A lot of very cool plot things that are happening in the movie that, like you said, if you sat there and really thought it through, you could probably punch a whole bunch of holes in it. But I thought that was incredibly well done. It always kept me interested. It's 2.5 hours. It's definitely a family movie. I would think there's like only one F-bomb, and it was not an F-bomb that's just flippant like Pulp Fiction. It was appropriate to the moment. So those I don't have a big problem with.
There may have been more than one, or there's S word. Yeah. It struck me a little bit more language than I'm used to seeing in Spielberg's, especially the family type, but not anything that kids haven't heard. And as I said, it wasn't overdone.
And I would say maybe 10, 11, 12 and up, maybe. You and I are so many years away from what it was like going with our kids to the movies and what would be appropriate or not. But I think that I guess technically there could be a couple of parts that would be considered intense. Certainly nothing very violent. I liked the scene, I think, what I'm going to talk about, when it was the girlfriend of what's his face that we just talked about, the antagonist.
Daniel Kellner's the character, Josh
So
Connor.
it was Daniel's girlfriend who sits and watches a video. You don't see exactly what's happening in the video, but you see her reaction to what she's watching in the video. That's something that is a filming technique that I fell in love with True Detective, with Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey. Did you ever see True Detective?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a scene that I'm happy they didn't show a frame of it, but it was a child abuse scene. And to watch Woody Harrelson's reaction and how intense it was, that in a lot of, almost like Jaws, you don't see the shark until later on. You see the reaction to it. For me, that was very powerful in the film. And that brought to light how the United States had dealt with the beings from another planet visiting and how they had dealt with the situation. So I thought that was really well done too. And a couple of action set pieces that I thought were, again, very Spielberg-esque. If I'm being critical, and I'm very critical about this with CGI, the animals, especially the fox, you're like, CGI, I think we're better now with that. The CGI is so.
You're not alone. I've listened to some other reviewers because I was curious on what was the take on it, and I've heard that on a couple of them, that the CGI, they were expecting cleaner CGI to come from somebody like Spielberg.
Exactly. But, and we're at the point now, without even bringing AI into it, that I think we're beyond that. I think we're ready to have CGI that you don't look at and be like, oh, that doesn't look right. Yeah. And I hate to say it, but that is something that did bring me out of the film. And I do not want to be brought out of a Spielberg film, or any film for that matter, but especially him. Yeah. Even back to the days of E.T. and the other day, you'll appreciate this. I've been into getting 4K discs recently. I had a sale there on E.T. on 4K. Even watching this, practical effects, and maybe, okay, and here I am in my 50s watching E.T., and we watched it dozens of times when I was a kid. It still holds up, even those practical effects. So these CGI effects, I think, take you out. But aside from that, the other parts of the film, especially when you see the alien stuff going on, that to me was very well done, especially the very end of the film. All of the footage that we see, that was really good. And I don't know if you noticed it. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I like the recovered footage. We've been in back rooms where we talked about discover footage and that. And so a lot of that which was disclosed, he was trying to disclose footage of for 70 years worth of Alien and all that. And Spielberg wrote this in 2023, and it was after the Congressional House Oversight Committee, when they had pilots, F-18 pilots, Navy pilots, really say, we don't know what this stuff is. And he came out and said he believes that there are aliens. In one of the interviews, Spielberg says he believes that there are aliens and they're among us. So this is very much like I said, really in a lot of ways a passion project. And he's talked about going back as a child, he was first intrigued by the vastness of space when his dad took him out to see a meteor shower. They drove and went to a park and people were watching, and he was 5 or 6. And so ever since then, he's done that. So obviously we can see that through Close Encounters, E.T., and now this. Even his first film before Duel, as a 17-year-old, I think there's 3 minutes. It was a 90-minute film, but only 3 survived. But it dealt with aliens of some sort.
Well, and let's remember too that we've talked about this several times, of going to the movies, and we even especially talked about it with Backrooms and Obsession, having that communal experience. We were in a theater that it was stuffed of people watching this preview screening, and that part at the end that we see the footage, you could hear a pen drop, and that was very cool to be a part of that communal experience of everybody watching and going, wow. It it was great. And I love that. That's not something you're going to get at home sitting in your media room or even in your living room with family. You just won't.
Well, and some of the humor too,
Yes.
mainly from Eve Hewson's boyfriend, or Jan Blankenship. Emily Blunt's character, Emily Blunt's character's boyfriend. He was a comedic relief, and it was subtle, but effective.
But another thing that I love that Spielberg does is he is really good in all of his storytelling, all the way to Jaws, of having a character that is very much like the viewer, that you're there going, what the hell is going on? And you are almost as much in the dark, if not, we're right about where the character is in the dark. And so he's great about having a character in there that you can immediately relate to because you're just as lost as they are. Even though you're seeing things unfurl and the onion that gets continually peeled, you're just as lost as they are. And you could very much relate to that character. And that's who that character was that you just mentioned.
Well, him and Emily Blunt as well. She all of a sudden, she's this ditzy weather reporter, and then all of a sudden she can read minds, understand and speak languages, and I liked the slow reveal. We talked about coming out of when we were coming out of the theater. The beginning didn't seem like a Spielberg film. The first, I don't know, 10 minutes I don't know. It just felt a little different, not in a bad way, in a neat way, I think. And I said there are some aspects of this that are really, I don't really attribute to Spielberg's directing style, but then there are a lot that are. And so, which is cool, but there was a bit of a slow reveal in what was going on, and so much of, well, let's just say how things, the first 15 minutes, you're not sure which direction, and we're not for the trailers and the name, you wouldn't know where it was heading.
Yes, very much so.
So that's always fun.
And you have, of course, the usual Spielberg-esque cinematography with the camera movement that is just, if you go and you dissect it, it's just gorgeous. And
like 20, 25 feet high, just stacked of TV screens.
Him and his cinematographers, and I know that he is very much a part of the shots that he gets, are just, they take your breath away. They're so good.
This is a typical Kaminsky film. And actually, I heard an interview with him, and Diane Keaton was the one that got him first connected to a cinematographer that's, Janis Kaminsky. She had directed a film, and he liked it, and he asked her about it, and he said, "Oh, who was your cinematographer?" So then they hooked up back in, I don't know, 10 or 15, 20 movies ago. But it's certainly, again, it has that feel, and it's a great experience. It's a fun experience. And not to get weird, but Spielberg's one of those directors that you take for granted. And especially these big epic storytelling. And how many more of these does he have? Especially with John Williams doing the score. He's 94. Oh, yeah. And the score was amazing. It had some good callbacks. You knew it was a John Williams score, just like it's a Mozart piece. I mean, so it wasn't copying and pasting for what he'd done before, but he just had that feel, which is nice. And but the cinematography, the way the film is shot, and he talked about, especially for this film, he used a lot of reflections. Some of them came by accident. Even there's the one shot, Coleman Domingo is I think in the studio, and they storyboarded it. Something was going to happen, and they had the storyboard. They were going to show how he was going to be shot after something happened, but ended up his reflection that came naturally in all the TV sets. And that whole set was not CGI. It was, when you see it, it's a control room for a TV station, and there's and all those were there, and all those were on, and that was all legit and real. So it's certainly one to go look. The ending did. I lost a lot on the ending. It, I wish he would have. Maybe they could have taken some of the chase scenes at the beginning, and some of those actually. There's one or two scenes where Josh O'Connor's character is going, particularly trying to rescue his girlfriend who's been captured by the generic Spielberg-esque generic government bad people, going back to E.T. And it was like they would have they would have found him. They would have said that. Just took me. I was like, no, this is ridiculous. You could have done that better. But it didn't get into the dealing with the question he wanted to address. How would we deal with that? If there's a disclosure, how would the world deal with that? And we'll talk about it in the faith issue. He's touched on it. But behind all that's going on, the world is at war. It's a very tense time. I don't know, is it China or North Korea? There's a lot of stuff going on in the midst of now. Someone's trying to disclose that we are not alone, and so that is involved as well. So and maybe you can't do it, but Spielberg, when I think back at Munich and AI,
Amistad
and some of these real message meaning films, he really gets in and really brings up the ambiguity and the challenges and the decisions and the difficulty of that. And I just feel like that didn't make it through. It's not a film for me that's going to transcend. I mean, it's great, watch it, enjoy it, but it's not going to be one that transcends. And much like the one behind me, 2001. And for me, this is to E.T. what 2010 was to 2001. And frankly, the story, and I don't think I'm giving away because most people probably don't know the story of 2010. The story from 2010 is a lot like this. So it was a decent film, but I saw it once or twice and see it again, much like it doesn't have the weight that 2001 had. And I don't think this one has, for me, quite the weight of Close Encounters or even E.T. Certainly not the weight of Schindler's List and some of these others.
Well, and again, going to E.T., that to me, out of almost any of his films, yes, Schindler's List definitely is the top of the list there. There's no arguing that. But for me, especially as a kid, and heck, man, if you were to read my part of the funeral that I read at my mom's funeral, a good portion of it was my experiences that I had with my mother going to see films. And two of the movies that I mentioned were Jaws and E.T. And it was a summer that E.T. came out that we saw it at this little movie theater in Nashua, New Hampshire, that they just had. We remember that theaters had E.T. for just weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And so we ended up seeing it, I'm not kidding, at least a dozen times. It was myself, my mom, my brother, and just the memories of that. But aside from all of that you remember in the back of your mind, just the movie itself, the human element of it, and having a friend, and going through so much in that case in the film with the divorce and not having there's so much rich material going on in E.T. and especially the end. God, forget about it. The very end, man. You've got to be a robot if you don't at least shed a little bit of a tear at the end of E.T. That it sticks with you. It is a Spielberg film that sticks with you.
Yeah.
And this one, I think I have to agree with you. It's not necessarily one that in a few years we're going to look back and be like, remember that free movie premiere that we went to? Gosh, I am never going to forget that film. It doesn't have that staying power as some of his other films do. For now, I believe it does. But there's a lot of other stuff that's going on in theaters right now, especially with The Obsession and the Backrooms thing, that might overshadow Disclosure Day. I'm not dumb enough to think that might not happen. It could. It might be. I think it's going to do really well. I think it's going to be first this weekend. But I still believe that Obsession and Backrooms, I think it's going to be a constant. It's going to be the strong arm there that's just going to keep those other ones down.
I have heard some people, or even the ones that maybe gave middling, even some poor reviews for this. Some people really just didn't care for it. I think some of that's just trying to get clickbait stuff. But even they're talking Emily Blunt as a possible nominee. In fact, one person said Emily Blunt and the actress from Obsession, two of the front leaders. I'm blanking out.
Oh, no doubt.
Indy. So Emily Blunt's Emily Blunt. She's just, and I didn't see Devil Wears Prada 2, but thinking back to Quiet Place, and she's just solid as they come, and she gives that performance, and all of them. Colin Firth's, I don't know, maybe it's just seeing him as a villain character, and usually I like people to get in that, but maybe I just still see him as the King's Speech. I don't, but it was okay. Maybe it was just the character that was a little.
I think you're right. I think we could have gone a little bit deeper into his character. We find out why he is the way that he is, but to me, it wasn't drilled in or didn't allow you to seep as much like you would a bag of tea to really understand his motivations. And I think you're right. That didn't make his character as rich. Now, for Emily's character, especially, and the lead, that I think you learn more of their story and you start to relate to them more and understand where more they're coming from.
Yeah. So for faith-wise, and he's pretty specific. He addresses, I think, too briefly, but he does address and show one of the characters, Jan Blankenship. So Josh O'Connor's girlfriend, trained to be a nun and left, and then once they're being hunted, and this is the beginning of the film, so there's really not too much. What's a safe place? Don't go back to your apartment. Don't go to any hotel. So she goes to this, back to this convent and she shares what they're doing, and she questions what would happen. What would happen if the world knows? And she's the one that's Josh O'Connor's character Daniel. He's the one that's wanting to disclose everything, and she's the one that pushes back and say, "Well, what happens if you do?" And in addition to Colin Firth's character, but what's going to be the result if you do this? How will they deal with it? And both as individuals and national and faith, and they talk about faith. So how will people of faith, and they were, I guess, focusing on the Christian faith or Judeo-Christian faith, what would be the impact of them? Will it cause them to lose their faith? And I think she was quoting a mixture maybe of the creation account in Genesis, which actually was on the Revised Common Lectionary a couple of weeks ago, when God gives them, says that humans are created in the image and likeness of God, and God makes them stewards, if you will, over the rest of creation. And then if you combining that with Psalm 8, where it says, when I look at the works of your hand, your fingers, the sun, the stars, and all of that, what are humans? But we are just under the divine, implying or saying that we're the top of creation. And she says, how are we going to deal with that lesson from Scripture when maybe there are some extraterrestrials that are smarter, quicker, maybe above us or more advanced than us? And the nun says, well, of this earth. And I don't know where he got that. But so, and it goes to say, how would we deal with that? And maybe if we're not wanting to, if we think it's ridiculous to think of it, say, in terms of if it was disclosed that there are extraterrestrial characters, how would that impact? How does it impact us with AI and some of the other stuff here that we're going on? Or what does it mean to be considered maybe the top of creation? I had a seminary professor. He's an ethics professor, and he was from Dallas, Texas. He cussed like a sailor, and he liked to shock people. And he loved to shock people journalists that would call him up because something would come up, and they'd say, "Hey, let's get a quote from a theologian," and they'd call him Duke. And someone said, I guess it was when one of the rovers landed on Mars or something. And so they called him up and said, what would it be like? How would it impact if, basically this question, how would it impact if we find life on Mars, even at microscopic level? And what would that mean to Christians? And he said, well, it wouldn't mean anything. It means Jesus Christ, the Lord of God to them too. What's the problem? And I guess God created them, and it wouldn't shake if anything, it might deepen it. Again, we look up and see stars, if you can find them nowadays, or the wonders of the world, maybe in the ocean, and how beautiful and diverse and all that. And now, if we see that there are others, maybe I'm naive, but I don't think it would. I think it would embolden faith, depending on what they said, maybe. Or,
well, that's the other thing too. If they turned out to be our James Cameron or Ridley Scott aliens, we may have another conversation. But if they're very much willing and coming to us peacefully, that I'm with you. I think that there could be something there.
Well, we really should be more fearful of ourselves than what's out there, as is going on now, and even in the world today. Sure. So we've got a ways to go before we need to really be worried about that. And it does, as we're asking that question, what does it mean? Would we be the top creation? Okay, well, we could talk about that. But until they come and show up, until there's a real disclosure day, let's assume people of faith were the top creation. How are we living into that? And I taught a class yesterday. How are we living into being stewards of creation? As there's so many that just don't want to have any responsibility or for care of the environment, or thinks it's too expensive, or put other things ahead of that. Yes, there are responsibilities that come with creating the image and likeness of God, and that's what makes us above other aspects of creation, is we carry that image and likeness. And for me, a lot of that is founded in our freedom of choice. God gives us that. And God has choice. God chose to create. God chooses to be in community. And that's why God created. And so how are we doing at being the top of God's creation? How are we being at living out our image and likeness of God? How are we doing as Christians at living out to the teachings of God? Some of us aren't doing very well at that. We're not loving our neighbors as we love ourselves, or as we love God, and because it's inconvenient or because it costs something. How are we at sacrificial love? I think if this film causes us to think, what would it be like? How would it impact our faith if we were to have this disclosed to us? I think again, that next step, then, if we can then consider, well, until that happens, how are we doing? What does it mean that we are God's top creation? And how are we living into that? And maybe how are we not? So I think that's an important question that hopefully maybe the film could inspire, either as we watch it and think about it, or persons of faith, or maybe persons that aren't faith, and now they've heard that, and they may think, well, how would that impact faith, and maybe start conversations.
That's good.
Yep.
Well, and one thing go ahead, man.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that with some films that are out there, I don't know, maybe it's just me. You start getting older, you start realizing, okay, time seems to be a lot more precious. So with almost every film that I've seen recently, I go, okay, I've seen it and I'm good with it. I would definitely love to go see this again. I want to go see it with my family.
Well,
multiple viewings. I really do.
Maybe then there maybe some of my questions, maybe I missed things. So as anything, you're going to see things, and it's certainly so full of things. You're going to see things you didn't see, or you're going to see them in a different way from understanding. So I think it would be worth second viewing again in a theater, because the experience of this it's not always going to be there. And again, a new Spielberg film, even if it's not perfect, is still an event. And with all that comes with it, with the texture, with the music, with the story, with just his, even now at 70 years old plus, his childlike desire to share stories and to live in stories. That's, again, it's not going to be there. At some point, he's not going to be making films anymore. And you won't get to see a Spielberg film in a theater for the first time. And you need to take advantage of that. So this is definitely a movie I would go see. For what people are saying, well, what's going to be his next? He is making, I think, some other films, and I've heard him say his next film is going to be a Western.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I was in an interview for something a year or two ago, or I forgot exactly the context, but he was talking about it, and he said, well, I can't go into it, but it sounded like he's doing in some pre-production or pre-story of a Western, because he hadn't done that and he wants to do that. So
wow.
that would be great. And
no kidding. That would be awesome.
So this is, it's summer. Go out, see it, enjoy it, maybe see it again and enjoy it for what it is, and think about some of these things, these questions that he raises, and maybe go a little bit beyond and deeper, and how you would, especially assuming people that may be listening to our podcast at least have some issue or interest or curiosity about faith. What does it mean? How does it how would it impact your faith? And then, until then, how does this idea that we are the top of God's created order, how does that impact our faith?
And I got to go back to Kenny's quote there. How many more times can you see a Steven Spielberg film for the first time? Go see it.